Let me tell you something. Silence is not weakness. It is self-command. They expected you to react. They expected the angry reply, the emotional explanation, and the desperate attempt to prove your pain was real. They expected the version of you that always came back with more words, more chances, and more access. But this time you gave them something they were not prepared for. Silence, not the silence of fear. Not the silence of weakness, the silence of someone who finally understands that some people do not want clarity, they want control. They want your reaction because your reaction tells them they can still move you. Your anger feeds their ego. Your explanations give them something to twist. Your pain becomes proof that they still have access to a place inside you. But when you walk away without the performance, the pattern breaks. There is no paragraph to argue with, no breakdown to judge, no apology to extract, and no emotional chaos to use against you. There is only your absence and the quiet truth that your peace is no longer available for someone else's ego. This is not revenge. Revenge still keeps them at the center. This is self-command. This is the moment you stop turning your dignity into a debate and stop giving your energy to someone who has already shown you what they do with it. Some people do not just want to hurt you. They want to watch what the hurt does to you. They want the message, the anger, the tears, and the explanation. Because as long as they can make you react, they can tell themselves they still have power. Your reaction becomes their evidence that they can still pull you away from peace. That is why your silence can disturb them more than your anger ever did. Anger gives them something to fight. A long message gives them something to twist. Tears give them something to dismiss. But self-control gives them nothing to use. Before you respond to someone who has hurt you, ask yourself one question. Am I speaking from dignity, or am I giving their ego the reaction it came for? That question alone can save you from many regrets. The Stoics understood that your first reaction is not always your wisest response. Someone can provoke you, but you decide whether that provocation becomes your master. Someone can disrespect you, but you decide whether your peace becomes their property. Pause before you feed the fire. Do not reply while your emotions are burning. Do not explain while you are desperate to be understood. Let the first wave pass. If something still needs to be said later, say it calmly and clearly, not desperately. When you stop giving people the emotional fuel they expected, something changes. They no longer meet the version of you that begs to be understood, argues to be valued, or breaks down to prove the pain is real. They meet a version of you that can feel deeply and still choose discipline. The most disturbing thing you can do to someone who expects control is stop being predictable. They thought they knew the script. They thought they knew exactly how you would react. But when you refuse to play the role they assigned to you, the pattern begins to collapse. Real silence is not a strategy to make someone miss you. It is not a performance. Real silence comes from seeing the pattern clearly and deciding not to participate in it anymore. You are not trying to confuse them. You are simply refusing to betray yourself to keep the old cycle alive. If someone knows that one word can make you explode, one delay can make you panic, or one accusation can make you defend yourself for hours, then they do not need to respect your peace. They only need to press the right button. But when that button stops working, they lose the old map to your emotions. They can still accuse, provoke, and criticize. But they no longer control your inner state. As Epictetus taught, no person is free who is not master of himself. True freedom is not pretending you feel nothing. True freedom is feeling everything and still choosing self-command. When someone tries to pull the old reaction out of you, do not hand it over. When they provoke you to explain, pause. When they act cold to make you chase, step back. When they accuse you just to keep the cycle alive, answer only what needs to be answered and nothing more. Growth begins when you stop confusing emotional urgency with truth. Just because you feel the urge to respond does not mean the response is wise. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is let the urge pass without obeying it. That is self-command. That is strength. And that is peace. When you stop being predictable to the wrong people, they may call you different. Let them. You are different. You are no longer the person who can be dragged into chaos simply because someone knows where your wounds are. You are no longer available for the same emotional script. And that is what shakes their ego. Not because you attacked it, but because you stopped acting as if it had authority over you. There comes a point where explaining yourself stops being communication and starts becoming a negotiation with your own dignity. You keep telling them what hurt you, why it hurt you, and how deeply it affected you. You try to prove that your intentions were pure, your heart was sincere, your pain was real, and your boundaries were reasonable. But the more you explain yourself to the wrong person, the more you begin to sound like you are asking permission to feel what you already know is true. This is how your worth gets pulled into a debate. They disrespect you, and suddenly you are defending why you deserve respect. They ignore your pain, and suddenly you are explaining why your pain should matter. They misunderstand you on purpose, and suddenly you are working harder to be seen clearly by someone who benefits from keeping you confused. That is not clarity. That is emotional energy being wasted where truth is not the goal. A person who genuinely wants to understand you will not need you to suffer for every point. They may ask questions. They may need time. They may not understand immediately. But they will care about the impact of their actions. The wrong person does something different. They make you explain the same wound until you begin doubting whether it was a wound at all. They turn your tone into the issue. They turn your reaction into the issue. They make your need for respect look like pressure and your boundaries look like cruelty. This is where silence becomes self-respect. Not because you have nothing to say, but because you finally realize your words are no longer safe in that space. If every explanation becomes another weapon against you, then speaking more is not strength. It is exposure. The Stoic understands that not everyone deserves access to their inner world. They speak clearly when speech is useful and stop when speech becomes surrender. Stop arguing about your value with someone committed to lowering it. Stop trying to prove your loyalty to someone who used your loyalty as leverage. Stop begging to be understood by someone who keeps pretending confusion so they never have to face accountability. Here is a simple rule. Explain once with clarity, not 10 times with desperation. If someone is willing to understand, one honest explanation is enough. If they are committed to twisting your words, 1,000 explanations will only leave you exhausted. Say what needs to be said calmly. Then let your actions speak, reduce access, end the conversation. Stop replying to arguments designed to pull you back into self-defense. Your worth is not a case they get to judge. Your dignity is not a courtroom. Your peace is not something you must submit for approval. When you walk away in silence, you are not saying, "I have no value." You are saying, "My value is no longer available for debate." As long as you keep reacting, people can keep hiding behind your reaction. When you get angry, they focus on your anger. When you send a long message, they focus on your tone. When you cry, they call you emotional. When you defend yourself, they accuse you of wanting to argue. Suddenly, the conversation is no longer about what they did. It becomes about how you responded to what they did. This is how many people avoid accountability. They provoke the wound and then criticize the bleeding. They create confusion and then judge your need for clarity. They act cold and then call you needy for asking what changed. If you continue reacting from pain, they always have a place to hide. But when you walk away in silence, that hiding place disappears. There is no argument to blame, no emotional message to dissect, no raised voice to replay, no desperate attempt to be understood that can be twisted into weakness. There is only the pattern standing there without your reaction covering it. That is why your absence becomes a mirror. It reflects back what your presence had been softening for too long. Think about someone who only notices the damage when you stop cleaning it up. As long as you keep explaining, forgiving quickly, returning too soon, and repairing what they keep breaking, your effort protects them from the full weight of their actions. You become the emotional cushion. You absorb the impact. You make the situation feel less serious because you are always there to make it survivable. Then one day, you stop. You stop cushioning the consequences. You stop translating your pain into words they can ignore. You stop standing in the same place trying to convince them to be responsible. And for the first time, they are left alone with the silence that follows their own behavior. That silence can be uncomfortable because it gives them no enemy to argue with and no drama to blame. It leaves only the truth. This is not revenge. Revenge says, "I want you to suffer." Self-respect says, "I will no longer protect you from the natural consequences of how you treated me." There is a profound difference. Revenge keeps you attached to their pain. Self-respect returns you to your peace. Revenge wants to watch them fall apart. Self-respect simply stops making your life responsible for holding them together. The Stoic perspective is simple. You do not chase someone into accountability. You do not beg them to see the wound they keep reopening. You do not spend your entire inner life trying to force another person to become fair. You act with dignity, you speak clearly when speech is useful. And when the pattern continues, you remove yourself, not because you are weak, but because you finally understand that staying and reacting only helps them avoid the mirror. Remember this rule. When your reaction becomes the distraction, stop giving one. If every conversation ends with them discussing how you said it instead of what they did, step back. If every explanation becomes a new trial, stop submitting evidence. If every emotional response becomes a weapon against you, choose silence, distance, and peace. Because sometimes the strongest statement you can make is the one you never have to say. Do not keep handing people material they can use to avoid the real issue. This is difficult because a part of you still wants recognition. You want them to say, "I see what I did." You want them to admit they were careless. You want them to finally understand the impact of their actions. But your job is not to force someone to look in the mirror. Your job is to stop covering that mirror with your own reactions. Your absence becomes powerful when it is clean. No performance, no public display, no secret hope that they suffer. Just distance with dignity. You leave them alone with the pattern and you return to yourself. Whether they face the truth or run from it is not yours to control. As long as you react, they can focus on your reaction. When you leave calmly, the pattern has no distraction. Sometimes that becomes the loudest truth you ever speak. Silence shows that you have standards, not just feelings. Some people mistake your emotions for weakness because they have only seen your soft side. They saw you care and assumed you would tolerate anything. They saw you forgive and assumed you had no limits. They saw you explain, return, soften, and try again. So they started believing your heart was bigger than your standards. Silence corrects that mistake. Walking away quietly shows that you have feelings, but you are not ruled by them. You may still care, but care is no longer enough to keep you in a place that disrespects you. You may still love, but love is not an excuse to abandon yourself. You may still miss someone, but missing them does not mean giving them the same access that taught them to treat you carelessly. Many people misunderstand strength. They think strength means feeling nothing. Real strength is feeling everything and still choosing what protects your peace. It is the moment your heart wants to explain, but your standards say enough. It is the moment your attachment wants to return, but your self-respect says not to the same pattern. It is the moment you stop letting emotions drag you back into places your wisdom already told you to leave. A person without standards becomes easy to control. If someone knows your love will always override your dignity, they will keep testing your limits. If they know your fear of losing them is stronger than your commitment to yourself, they will continue giving less while expecting you to stay. If they know one soft message can erase months of disrespect, they do not need to change. They only need to say the right words when you are ready to leave. That is why silence matters. Not silence as punishment, but silence as proof that you are no longer negotiating your limits. You are not announcing every standard. You are living it. You are not giving speeches about self-respect. You are practicing it. You are not begging someone to understand the line. You are simply no longer available on the other side of it. The lesson is simple. Love without wisdom becomes attachment. Patience without boundaries becomes self-destruction. The goal is not to become cold. The goal is to become governed by your values instead of your impulses. Before you return to someone who hurt you, ask yourself one question. What standard would be violated if I went back? Not what you feel, not what you miss, not what they promised. Ask what your return would teach both of you. Would it teach them that disrespect has consequences? Or would it teach them that your boundary was only temporary? Would it teach your mind that your word can be trusted? Or would it teach your old habits that enough emotion can still defeat your self-respect? Sometimes going back is not love. It is withdrawal from loneliness. Sometimes explaining again is not maturity. It is fear. Sometimes forgiving too quickly is not kindness. It is the habit of protecting the connection while abandoning the person inside you who needed protection first. You can care about someone and still refuse to be controlled by that care. You can wish them well and still remove their access. You can have compassion and still keep your distance. That is not cruelty, that is order. That is your inner world finally learning that emotions are real. But standards decide direction. When you walk away in silence, you are not saying you never cared. You are saying your care no longer cancels your dignity. You are saying your love is not a license for someone else's carelessness. You are saying your patience has boundaries. Your forgiveness has wisdom, and your presence has value. That is what shakes the ego. They expected feelings without standards. They expected softness without consequences. They expected a heart without the boundary. Instead, they met someone who could care deeply and still choose self-respect. Some people do not understand words. They understand absence. They do not understand the first explanation. They do not understand the second chance. They do not understand patience, waiting, or restraint. As long as you keep staying, they assume the damage is manageable. As long as you keep reacting, they believe the connection can still be controlled. But when you walk away calmly, without a performance, they meet something different. They meet consequence. Consequence is not revenge. Revenge wants someone to suffer. Consequence simply says, I am no longer available for the pattern you keep repeating. It does not need to insult. It does not need to explain for the 10th time. It does not need to prove anything. It simply removes access from a place where access was abused. That is why silence can feel so heavy. People may be prepared for an argument. They may be prepared for another message. They may be prepared to turn your pain into a conversation they can control. But they are often unprepared for calm distance. They are unprepared for someone who stops auditioning for basic respect. They are unprepared for absence, carrying a consequence that words can no longer carry. You are not trying to make them pay. You are trying to stop paying with your peace. You are not trying to break them. You are trying to stop breaking yourself to keep the connection alive. You are not teaching through cruelty. You are allowing reality to teach what explanations could not. Remember this practical rule. Do not announce every consequence before you live it. If someone repeatedly disrespects you, you do not need a speech every time. If someone keeps taking your presence for granted, you do not need endless warnings. If someone keeps turning your pain into drama, you do not need to keep performing pain so they can finally believe it. Sometimes the clearest sentence is action. Less access, less explanation, less availability, more self-respect. And when guilt appears because the other person finally reacts, remember this: do not confuse compassion with rescue. You can care about how someone feels and still allow them to experience the consequences of their actions. You can wish them well and still not return. Because protecting your peace is not cruelty, it is responsibility. You can understand their pain and still refuse to make your peace the price of soothing it. That is not coldness, that is maturity. Consequence without drama is one of the strongest forms of self-respect. It says, I do not need to destroy you, but I will not keep destroying myself. It says, I do not need to win this argument, but I will no longer live inside it. It says, I do not hate you, but I am done handing you the power to keep disturbing my soul. So walk away cleanly. Do not slam the door just to be heard. Do not leave a wound behind just to prove you had one. Do not turn your silence into a weapon and call it healing. Leave because staying keeps costing you too much. Leave because peace has become more important than being understood. Leave because self-command sometimes means refusing to participate in the same chaos one more time. You are not walking away to break them. You are walking away because staying would break you. And when that is true, silence is not punishment. It is the natural consequence of a person finally choosing his own peace. Now consider something most people do not want to admit. Sometimes you walk away in silence, but your mind is still standing there waiting for a reaction. You do not send the message, but you keep checking if they noticed. You do not explain anymore, but you keep wondering if they finally understand. You stop reacting on the outside, but inside you are still asking the same question. Did it affect them? That is not freedom yet. That is attachment wearing a calmer face. If your peace still depends on whether their ego breaks, then their ego is not the only one involved. Yours is too. Your ego wants proof that you mattered. It wants to know they regret it. It wants to see them confused, disturbed, humbled, or suddenly aware of your value. While that desire is human, it can quietly keep you trapped in the same emotional prison you were trying to leave. This is where real self-mastery becomes uncomfortable. It is not enough to control the reaction people see. You must also examine the reaction still happening inside you. It is not enough to look silent if your mind is still begging for a result. It is not enough to walk away if your heart keeps turning around every few steps to see whether they are suffering. That is still giving them power over your inner state. Ask yourself honestly, if they never apologize, can I still move forward? If they never admit they were wrong, can I still protect my peace? If they never feel what they lost in the way I secretly hope, can I still choose myself? These questions are difficult because they expose the final attachment, not to the person, but to the outcome you wanted from leaving. After you walk away, stop collecting signs. Stop checking their posts for hidden messages. Stop asking mutual friends if they mentioned you. Stop reading their silence like a secret code. Stop turning your healing into surveillance. The more you watch them, the less you return to yourself. Your nervous system cannot fully heal while it is still monitoring the person who disturbed it. This does not mean you are weak for wanting them to understand. Of course you want that. When someone takes your care for granted, a part of you wants life to make the lesson obvious. You want justice. You want balance. You want them to feel the weight of what they treated lightly. But if you make their realization the price of your freedom, you are still not free. Freedom begins when you can say, maybe they will see it, maybe they will not. But I will no longer sacrifice my peace waiting for their awareness. That sentence is not soft. It is command. It is the moment you stop needing their ego to collapse so your dignity can stand. Because the goal was never to sit at a distance and enjoy their discomfort. That is still attachment. That is still a relationship with their reaction. The goal is to become unavailable to the entire cycle. The provocation, the reaction, the silence, the checking, the hope, and the disappointment. You are not just leaving the person. You are leaving the need to be validated by what they feel after you leave. When you stop watching their ego, something powerful happens. Your silence becomes clean. Your absence becomes honest. Your healing stops being a message aimed at them and becomes a life returned to you. That is when they truly lose access, not only to your words, but also to your attention, your obsession, your waiting, and your emotional participation. Do not walk away and keep your soul in their room. Do not leave physically while your mind remains seated beside their reaction. If their ego breaks, let it break without an audience. If they regret it, let them carry that regret without you building a home inside it. If they never understand, let your peace be strong enough to continue anyway. The strongest silence is not the one that makes them react. It is the one that no longer needs to know if they did. The real victory is self-command. The real victory is not that their ego breaks. The real victory is that your ego no longer needs to see it happen. That is freedom. That is strength. And that is peace. Remember one truth. Silence is not about making someone miss you, regret losing you, or finally understand your value. Silence is about reclaiming your own peace. The real victory is not watching someone else's ego break.